and welcome to Deck Ideas, where we explore the full potential of various Magic the Gathering commanders. In this video, we will walk through a thorough thought process for brewing a deck around Zhulodok Void Gorger. Let's start by breaking the card down. Zhulodok is pretty simple, all things considered. For 6 total mana, one of which must be colorless, we have a 7/4 that gives colorless spells that we cast from our hand that have mana values 7 or greater, 2 instances of Cascade, that is triggers that cast a lower mana value spell from the top of our library for free. Basically, when we cast a 7-drop colorless spell from our hand, we're getting 3 spells for the price of 1. Now, technically, any commander where the 99 main deck cards have no color identity can run any legendary creature as its commander, but if you're looking for a truly colorless commander, there aren't actually that many options. As of making this video, a Scryfall search for colorless legendary creatures yields just 17 results. 2 out of those 17 aren't even legal commanders. D00 is an uncard and Emrakul is banned. 2 are technically legal as commanders, but were designed for draft formats. It might be kind of cute to brew with them, but they're pretty darn bad. Not to mention that their partner and background abilities mean that they're not generally actually going to be leading colorless decks. 5 are the remaining not banned Eldrazi Titans, which each have their own subtleties, but are all variations on the similar theme. Huge bombs with a useful cast trigger, and they represent one of the scariest attacking creatures in the game. Which leaves 7 more colorless commanders, and these 7 are all pretty unique from each other, but my point here is that there are still relatively few colorless commander options, and Zhulodok is the first to really reward what colorless decks are naturally inclined to do anyway, that is, aggressively accelerating into massive bombs. Myr Battlesphere, Pentavis, Phyrexian Triniform, and Triplicate Titan are the most quintessential bombs for this particular colorless build. I mean, obviously, they qualify for Zhulodok's Cascade. They are potent combat threats on their own, and they're armies in a can, allowing us to just spam a bunch of tokens. Perhaps less obvious than those elements, though, they are also combo pieces. Combined with Nim Deathmantle and either Ashnod's Altar or Krark-Clan Ironworks, any of those previously mentioned bombs can make infinite mana and infinite tokens. Let me walk you through how. So let's start by walking through Myr Battlesphere. When that enters the battlefield, we create 4 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature tokens. Equip Nim Deathmantle to the Myr Battlesphere. Sacrifice all 4 of these to make 8 mana, and then we also sack the Myr Battlesphere, bringing us to 10 mana floating. That will trigger the Nim Deathmantle, so we'll pay 4, going down to 6 floating, to return Myr Battlesphere. Equip it to Nim Deathmantle. ETB trigger. We make 4 Myr, and we're exactly where we started, except we have 6 mana floating. Easy to see how this one goes infinite. This time, let's talk about Phyrexian Triniform and or Triplicate Titan. These are functionally the same for the purposes of this combo. So let's say Phyrexian Triniform has Nim Deathmantle equipped. Sacrifice the Triniform, which will put 2 different triggers on the stack. One is a Nim Deathmantle trigger. The other is the Triniform's trigger to make 3/3/3 golems. So let's resolve the Triniform trigger first. Sacrifice 2 of them then. To pay for the Nim Deathmantle trigger, which will bring back the Phyrexian Triniform. We're right back where we started, except we have a Phyrexian Golem in play, which means that this is mana and or token positive. We'll make infinite mana and infinite tokens. Finally, and perhaps most convolutedly, there is Pentavis. Let's say we have 1 mana to create a Pentavite. We can sack this Pentavite to make 2 colorless mana. We can use 1 of this colorless mana to remove a counter to create another Pentavite, which we will then sacrifice to make 2 more mana. This time we can remove 2 of these, I suppose, to make 2 Pentavites in one go. I can sacrifice both of these Pentavites to generate 4 more mana. That leaves us with 5 floating. Then I can sacrifice the Pentavis to generate 2 more mana. That will also trigger Nim Deathmantle. We'll go down to 3 colorless floating and return Pentavis with the Deathmantle equipped. And we're back where we started, but again, with 3 mana floating now. So this is mana positive, infinite tokens, infinite mana, You get the picture. Even without a sacrifice outlet to make these interactions truly infinite, Nim Deathmantle is also just good for incremental value, you know, recurring token generation triggers over and over the course of like a grindier game. Same thing with Scarecrow here. And Mer Retriever, Junk Diver, Workshop Assistant, and Scrap Trawler all return artifacts to our hand, which is slower for token generation purposes, but you know, remember, we get to cascade off of those colorless bombs that we return to our hand. Alternatively, cards like Diver and Retriever have a tendency to just stumble into infinite combos without even necessarily trying to. Again, let me show you how this works. This one is pretty common and pretty straightforward, but in case you haven't seen it, I can sacrifice Mere Retriever to Krark-Clan Ironworks to make 2 colorless mana. If there was an artifact in my graveyard, I could return it, but currently there isn't. No matter. I will sacrifice Junk Diver to Krark-Clan Ironworks. That brings me up to 4 colorless mana floating. It has the same trigger as the mirror, but this time the mirror is in my graveyard. With 4 mana floating, I can spend 1 of it, because remember, Foundry Inspector reduces the cost by 1. I'll go down to 3 colorless floating, cast the Mirror Retriever, then sacrifice the Mirror Retriever to Krark-Clan Ironworks. I now have 5 floating. I'll return Junk Diver to my hand. This loop represents infinite mana. Also, interestingly, Ashnod's Altar works in place of Krark-Clan Ironworks. Cloud Key works in place of Foundry Inspector. Joyra's Familiar also works in place of Cloud Key or Foundry Inspector. Workshop Assistant works in place of, where is it? The Junk Diver. There are all sorts of iterations of the same combo that we can hit in different ways. We're going to get there somehow, some way. At some point. Another class of cards that strongly synergize with Zhulodok are colorless spells with a high mana value, but that don't actually cost very much mana, if any at all. If we control 7 artifacts, for example, we can cast Mere Enforcer or Sojourner's Companion for free because of Affinity for Artifacts. And cost reductions like Affinity for Artifacts don't technically change these spells' mana values, so Zhulodok still adds Cascade to their casts. That's 3 spells for 0 mana, which that's pretty good if you ask me. In addition to having Affinity for Artifacts itself, Mycosynth Golem also grants affinity to our other artifact creatures, which opens the door to all sorts of nutty potential lines of play. And Not of This World is very interesting. Obviously, it protects Zhulodok or any other permanent that is important to us, but we can also pseudo-cheat it onto the stack just for the purpose of triggering Cascade. We run a few cards in here that allow us to target our own permanents with abilities. For example, with Staff of Completion, we can tap, pay 1 life, target Zhulodok for destruction actually, but hold priority and then cast Not of This World for free, targeting the staff's ability and thereby putting 2 Cascade triggers on the stack. Casting spells for free is awesome, but we still have to pay full price for most of this deck's bombs most of the time. And normally on this channel, we're shooting for, approximately a 90th percentile power level, basically as tuned as possible, but without resorting to like CEDH lines that might become redundant after a few videos. Ordinarily, that means foregoing fast mana, artifacts like these that are immediately mana positive. Like these are so strong in an opening hand that they usually don't belong outside of CEDH pods, in my view, but in a colorless deck, I think we can make an exception. We can still draw cards, tutor, interact with our opponent's boards, even without access to any color at all and the vast majority of cards ever printed. The game just expects us to pay way more mana to do those things. So in order to have agency in the game, colorless decks have to blitz mana as quickly as the game allows. We won't usually use these rocks in episodes of deck ideas, but just like in Magic itself, for almost every rule, there is an exception, and today here they are. But not only are we running the game's absolute best mana rocks, we are also running a huge number of rocks overall, I think 24 in total. Rocks like Mind Stone that can be sacrificed to draw cards are extremely useful, given that it can be difficult to draw cards without access to any colors. Similarly, Unstable Obelisk, or Wobble as it should obviously be nicknamed, doubles as an expensive but very useful removal effect. Basalt Monolith is a great rock all on its own, and it's also half of 2 different 2 card combos that each generate infinite colorless mana. With Forsaken Monument, the monolith taps for an additional mana, meaning that we can tap for 4, untap for 3, and then repeat that infinitely, netting 1 each time. And Monolith's combo with Rings of Brighthearth is just barely more complicated. This is a very well-known classic combo, but in case it's new to you, let me walk you through it. Let's say we have a board state with at least these permanents. We can tap Basalt Monolith to add 3, tap these wastes to add 2 more colorless mana. For 3 of the 5 that we have floating, we can put an untap of Basalt Monolith on the stack. However, doing that triggers Rings of Brighthearth. Whenever we activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, we may pay 2. If we do, we copy it. So let's use our last 2 mana, copy it. We now have 2 untaps of Basalt Monolith on the stack. The first one will resolve, but we will hold priority, and in response to the second one, add 3 more to our mana pool. 1, 2, 3. Then that second one will resolve, and we can tap Basalt Monolith for 3 more. Boop, boop, boop. We now have 6 mana floating, and maybe you notice that's 1 more than we started with. Put an untap of Basalt Monolith on the stack. That will trigger Rings of Brighthearth. We will pay 2, doink, doink, to put another on the stack, and this generates infinite mana. Staff of Completion is a combination mana rock, sacrifice outlet, and card draw effect. Hedron Archive and Stonespeaker Crystal also double as card draw, and reducers like Foundry Inspector have already featured prominently in one combo today, so what's one more? Cloud Key, Inspector, Joyra's Familiar, and Ugin would be worth running strictly as artifact reducers, but if you've played Commander for a while, you've likely seen someone draw their entire deck by pairing one of those up with Sensei's Divining Top and an effect that lets them cast spells from the top of their library, like Mystic Forge. In Sensei's Top, we can tap to draw a card and then put Sensei's Top on top of our library. So we'll do exactly that. Tap the top, draw a card, put the top on top. Because of our Foundry Inspector, top costs 1 less. Because of Mystic Forge, we can cast it from the top. We cast top from the top, tap the top, draw the top, top on top, cast top from top for free, tap top, draw a card, top on top, and we just do this until we hit enough mana positive rocks like Mox Diamond, and then we will just continue doing it until we hit Aetherflux Reservoir or something even better. And rounding out our mana rocks / acceleration package, Dreamstone Hedron is just 3 Mind Stones in a trench coat, which we love. Clock of Omens is good for untapping big rocks like the Hedron or this Thran Dynamo here, and maybe you're picking up on a pattern here, but it's also a combo piece if you'd believe it. Clock of Omens, Staff of Domination, Sculpting Steel as a copy of Staff of Domination, and any mana rock that taps for 3 or more mana represents an infinite loop. Again, let me show you. So with Sculpting Steel as a copy of Staff of Domination, we tap Thran Dynamo for 1, 2, 3 colorless mana, tap the staff and tap the staff to activate Clock of Omens to untap the Thran Dynamo. We will do that. Tap the Thran Dynamo. We have 6 floating. We can use 1 of it to activate the untap ability on this staff, and then another 1 of it to activate the untap ability on this staff. Tap both staffs to activate Clock of Omens, targeting Thran Dynamo. We're mana positive when we do this. Again, infinite mana. With the infinite mana, in this case, we can gain infinite life and draw our deck with Staff of Domination, with either Staff of Domination. We can also use Clock of Omens to make infinite mana and infinite creature tokens using any rock that taps for 3 or more mana, and a Mimic Vat that has Myr Battlesphere imprinted. So we can make 3 mana with Thran Dynamo, use that 3 mana to activate Mimic Vat to make a token copy of Myr Battlesphere. When that enters, we will make 4 Myr tokens. We can tap 2 Myr to activate Clock of Omens, targeting Thran Dynamo. And we can tap 2 more Myr to activate Clock of Omens again, targeting Mimic Vat. Activate Thran Dynamo again to activate Mimic Vat again to make another copy of Myr Battlesphere. This is infinite creatures, infinite mana, and we're going to make them infinitely small. We can also go infinite by replacing Thran Dynamo with either Krark-Clan Ironworks or Ashnod's Altar, and replacing Myr Battlesphere with either of our 9-drop Golem Makers. So with Phyrexian Triniform imprinted onto a Mimic Vat, and assuming that we have 3 mana to activate the Mimic Vat, we make a token copy of the Triniform, sacrifice this token copy to Ashnod's Altar to generate 2 colorless mana. It will also create 3 Phyrexian Golem tokens. Tap 2 of them to activate Clock of Omens, targeting Mimic Vat. Then we can sacrifice to go up to 4 colorless mana. We'll use 1, 2, 3 of that to activate the Mimic Vat all over again, create another token copy of Phyrexian Triniform, and yeah, repeat the process. Mirror Works, Mirror Retriever, and either of our 2 mana sack outlets allows us to return all artifacts from our graveyard to hand, and is just 1 piece away from representing infinite mana with Clock of Omens or a reducer. Let's say we have this board state. We can tap Soul Ring to cast Mirror Retriever. Mirror Works will trigger, allowing us to pay 2 more mana to create a token copy of the Retriever. We will sacrifice the original Retriever to generate 2 colorless mana, and then we will sacrifice the token copy of the Retriever, generating 2 more, and we have a trigger to return the original Retriever to our hand. We'll use 2 of the mana we generated, go down to 2 floating, recast the Retriever, that'll trigger Mirror Works, use the 2 that's left to create a token copy, and you'll notice this is not mana positive, but we can return all artifacts to hand, and if we have Foundry Inspector in play, say, it becomes mana positive. It also works if we use Clock of Omens instead of the Foundry Inspector. Pay 2 mana to recast the Mirror Retriever, doesn't have a reduced cost anymore. When that triggers Mirror Works, pay 2 more mana, create a token copy. There is a moment here where we are able to tap Mirror Retriever, activate Clock of Omens, untap Soul Ring, tap Soul Ring to make 2 more, blah, 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 blah. This is infinite. Spine of Ishsa is solid colorless removal that qualifies for Zhulodok's Cascade, and combined with Sculpting Steel and KCI, allows us to destroy any permanent for just 1 mana. With a reducer, like Joyra's familiar here, we can destroy all of our opponent's permanents. With this board state and Sculpting Steel in our hand, we cast the Sculpting Steel. We let it enter as a copy of Spine of Ishsa. When it enters, destroy target permanent. Let's target one of our opponent's land. We will sacrifice the Sculpting Steel to Krark-Clan Ironworks to generate 2 colorless mana, but because it was a copy of Spine of Ishsa, it has a put into the graveyard from the battlefield trigger. We return it to our hand. Oh, what do you know? We're right where we started with 2 floating, which is just enough to cast it. We will cast the Sculpting Steel. It'll enter as a Spine of Ishsa, and I don't know, let's blow up another one of our opponent's lands. We'll blow up their entire boards, everything without indestructible, I suppose, and they'll probably scoop. At this point, it should be apparent that this deck runs a ridiculous number of combos involving flexible overlapping pieces to a degree where we would need like a spreadsheet to figure out exactly how many there are. Certainly there are dozens, maybe there are hundreds, I don't even know. I've done my best to highlight all of the primary combo themes in this build, but it's possible, if not likely, that I have completely overlooked something. So by all means, please do leave your own combo ideas and insights as a comment below. Regardless of how many combos are in here though, we're still going to need to draw into them, which is somewhat challenging in a colorless deck, but we do have our ways. First, it's worth saying that, while cascading twice via Zhulodok isn't technically card draw, it is absolutely card advantage that helps to, kind of smooth over some of the problems inherent to colorless decks vis-a-vis card draw. We've already gone over Top, Staff of Domination, and Mystic Forge in combo contexts, but, it's worth noting that, more abstractly, even on their own, they are very solid card draw effects for a colorless build. Similarly, we've already covered our acceleration suite, but a quick reminder, 5 of our rocks also draw us cards, which leaves us with Mind's Eye, Book of Wrath, and Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Now, Mind's Eye has been a commander staple from the beginning. Over the years, its stock has fallen as power creep makes it ever easier to draw cards, generally for less than 6 mana in most decks, but in a colorless deck, even in 2023, this one is still primo. Book of Wrath has been a pet card of mine for a while. I mean, granted, 8 mana to draw our first card is very steep, but that's playing a colorless commander for you. After we untap though, or if we just cascade into this, because we are generating so much mana, we can often use the book to dig for an outright win. And while we are decidedly not playing an Eldrazi Titan deck, a 10 mana uncounterable sorcery that says Cascade, Cascade, draw 4 cards would absolutely be worth playing, and Kozilek is that with an Eldrazi Titan stapled to it. So we can make room for one. Every combo deck wants tutors, and again, while it's very mana intensive in a colorless deck, we do have ways to accomplish this, right? For the bargain price of 10 or even 12 mana to cast and activate, we have Ring of Three Wishes or Planar Portal to do a perfectly serviceable demonic tutor impersonation. And while Planar Bridge requires 14 mana and Forge Master has to deal with summoning sickness with so many overlapping combos in this build, usually tutoring a permanent directly into play comes pretty close to winning the game. Perhaps more than anything else, colorless decks really hurt for interaction. There's not a ton. That's not to say we're totally helpless though. We've already covered Wobble Wobble and Spine in other contexts, and along with Scour from Existence, we do have just a smidgen of targeted removal, and these effects also hit any permanent, which represents excellent flexibility, if not mana efficiency. And All Is Dust and Ugin the Spirit Dragon's -X ability can be utterly backbreaking for our opponents. You know, every single permanent in our deck, of course, is colorless, thereby unaffected by these board wipes, and board wipes that have Cascade that only affect our opponents are just supremely dirty in the best possible way. And while limiting ourselves to only colorless cards is mostly a disadvantage, it's not strictly a disadvantage in that we do not need to worry about color fixing even a little bit. That means we get to run a whole bunch of non-basic utility lands, 30 to be exact. We're still running 6 wastes because every deck should have a few basic lands for paths to exile and what have you, but the bulk of our land base helps us to accelerate further and mitigate other weaknesses inherent to colorless decks. We're running 11 lands of varying quality that do, or at least have the potential to, accelerate our mana at a faster rate than most lands, 1 mana per turn. 10 more of our lands allow us to either draw cards or at least filter the top cards of our library, again with varying degrees of quality, but very good in a colorless deck that needs those things a lot. Inventor's Fair, Sanctum of Ugin, and Urza's Saga are amazing in this deck, ultimately allowing us to search up game-breaking effects, or at least a mana crypt. Mycosynth Gardens and Thespian Stage are super flexible. I mean, often their copy abilities will just target permanents that allow them to become even more mana positive, maybe Mana Crypt and Scorched Ruins, say, but they can absolutely be used in more creative ways situationally. Which leaves us with 4 miscellaneous non-basics. Command Beacon and Emergence Zone are just good stuff commander staples. We run Darksteel Citadel just in case we ever have to artifact land cycle Sojourner's Companion, and Glimmer Post is in here just to occasionally boost Cloud Post. Here is the full deck list. There's also a link in the description to this deck on moxfield.com. Please feel free to pause this video if you want to linger on the list for a moment, but without further ado, let's head on over to Moxfield and demonstrate what an opening hand might look like.
All right, this opening hand, it strikes me as straight gas. The only question is, what are we really going to do with this? We don't have a payoff yet, but hopefully we'll draw into something. Wastes is perfectly fine. I'll play an Urza's Saga. I'll tap it for mana. I will play a Soul Ring, and then I will tap the Soul Ring to play a Liquid Metal Torque, and I'll make your mother an artifact. No, never mind. I'll leave it untapped. Go to turn 2. Spine of Ishsa. What do you know? Urza's Saga will get a counter. I'll just play a Thought Vessel at the end of the opponent's turn before ours for 1, 2, activate Urza's Saga to create a construct. Go to turn 3, things will untap. I drew a Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. Urza's Saga will get its 3rd counter. I will tap it for a colorless mana in response. And it will sacrifice, and I will search. Now, do I just want a mana rock? Probably. We're probably blitzing into casting Zhulodok and then casting the Spine of Ishsa to Cascade. And then we'll play the Sanctum of Ugin before that. So we already have Soul Ring in place, so that means we're going to look for the other one. Close and shuffle. Mana Crypt is in play. I think we have to go Sanctum of Ugin because we want that triggered ability when we cast Spine of Ishsa. And for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's go ahead and... 6. I know how much my commander costs. 6. My commander costs 6 mana, of course. Turn 4. Play a Wastes. Here is where things get spicy. Assuming our opponents didn't deal with Zhulodok. Maybe they would have. Maybe we just have to recast Zhulodok this turn, which is fine. One thing about a deck that so aggressively ramps is that it doesn't matter that much if they kill our commander, because we'll cast cast our commander for 8. We'll cast our commander for 10. We'll cast our commander for 12. We're good for it. I'll play 3 Dynamo. And then for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll tap the Sanctum of Ugin because we're going to sacrifice it. I will cast the Spine of Ish-Sa. This triggers a few things. Let's go ahead and resolve the Sanctum of Ugin first. So I will reveal a Mirror Enforcer and put that into my hand. I'm curious. Then our first Cascade will happen. Okay, not that. That costs the same amount. Oh, Kuldotha Forge Master. Second Cascade. Ring of 3 Wishes. Oh, okay. Let's cast Mirror Enforcer for free. Cascade, Cascade. Ashnod's Ult. Okay, okay, all right. We might be going off right now. And then Hedron Archive. That's perfectly fine as well. 1, 2, 3. And then I guess I'll sacrifice the Enforcer to the Ashnod's Altar for 5. Activate Ring of 3 Wishes and tutor Sojourner's Companion. That'll go to our hand. We'll close and shuffle. And we'll cast it for free. Cascade, Cascade. That's a land. That's a land. That's a Mirror Works. Okay. Second Cascade is a Mana Vault. When Mana Vault enters, there is a Mirror Works trigger, which I can pay for with the Mana Vault itself if I want to. Sure, I'll float 3. I'll make a copy of Mana Vault. Then the Sojourner's Companion enters. That also triggers Mirror Works. And I guess I might as well pay 2 because I can always sack it to make 2 mana with the Ashnod's Altar. So I'll make a token copy of the Sojourner's Companion as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the end of the line for this particular turn. Let's go to turn 5, which will certainly be a very mild Metalwork Colossus. I mean, I think we win in about 10,000 different ways, but let's do the fun thing, which is to cast a Metalwork Colossus for free, triggering Cascade, Cascade. First Cascade is an Ugin the Ineffable. Of course, our things will cost 2 less. Our second Cascade is a Mirror Battle Sphere. Tap Mana Crypt. Crack the Hedron Archive. Let's draw 2 cards. I don't know. 1, 2. Oh, look, a Kozilek. This costs 2 less, right? So it costs 8. We'll make an 8th like this. Great. Kozilek. Let me draw 4 first. Draw, 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 and then Cascade, Cascade. First Cascade. This is a planar portal. Second Cascade is another Ugin. God, if I was just goldfishing by myself, I'd just be like, I just win. But no, what? Okay, what is the win? I'll play a Scorched Ruins as my land for turn. I will sacrifice a Wastes and a Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I guess 5, 6. I'll sack a Construct. I will activate the Planar Portal to search my library. I will grab a Forsaken Monument and put it into my hand. I will close and shuffle. For 1, 2, 3, I will cast the Forsaken Monument, which costs 2 less because of Ugin the Ineffable. Then I will sack a Sojourner's Companion for 2 mana, a Sojourner's Companion for 2 mana, and Metalwork Colossus for... Oh yeah, and I can just loop Metalwork Colossus. I'll sacrifice that for 2 mana. Hold that thought. I'll activate Ring of 3 Wishes, and we're going to grab Krark-Clan Ironworks for sure. I forgot to make my mirror tokens. That makes this a lot easier. I have 4 of these. Okay, so I have 1 floating, back 1 of these, 2, 3. I'll cast a Krark-Clan Ironworks for 2. I'll activate Kuldotha Forge Master. I will sacrifice 1, 2. Spine of Ishar turns my hand. And I don't know, Mana Crypt. Who needs it? 3 to search for an artifact and put it into play. That artifact will be Basalt Monolith. Basalt Monolith and Forsaken Monument. This is infinite mana, but Spine of Ishsaw is a loop with infinite mana, and Krark-Clan Ironworks. So I'll just blow up all their permanents and they'll scoop. We got them upside down and backwards. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Well, I sure hope that you've learned as much from watching this video as I did from researching it, and that it helps you to have as much fun as friends and cardboard can combine to provide. If you enjoyed it, which I'm betting you did if you made it this far, please do all of the standard YouTube things. Click the like button, subscribe to this channel, and click on the bell so that you get notified about new uploads when I have them. And maybe send a link on over to one of your friends who would also enjoy or at least benefit from this content. If you want to see more videos like these, spreading the word is the single best thing you can do to help make that happen. That's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching again. And remember, as always, you cannot lose the game if you just hold priority with a winning effect of your opponents on the stack, and you just hold that priority, and you hold that priority, and you hold that priority. You have to outlive your opponents, I guess.